Hello and welcome back once again to the show. My name's Relevant, this is Do All the Things. And on today's episode, the Cobalt Conspiracy, or at least that's what I'm calling this project, where I'm going to be building another DOD 250 type clone pedal, except this time I'm going to be using all the wrong kinds of components. Let's see how this is going to turn out. In the tone world, there are what I might consider a lot of old wives' tales about what's good and what's bad. For example, film capacitor good, ceramic capacitor bad. Or how about carbon comp resistor good, metal film resistor bad? Wow, I don't know how much I buy into this kind of thing. There's a lot of debate out of there about how pedals sound. Recently watching a Wampler video where he's talking about the TS-808. People will be like, well, this pedal's better for this pedal's better for that. Or they might have two versions of the same pedal and be like, well, that version's better for this, and that version's better for that. Well, buds, it all comes down to tolerances. Let me tell you. So today, instead of using film capacitors, I'm going to be using ceramic capacitors. That's one of the biggest controversial ones. They say friends don't let friends use ceramic capacitors. And why is that? I'm also going to be using metal film resistors instead of carbon film or carbon comp. I believe carbon comp is completely obsolete now. There's no reason to be using it. Carbon film is going to give identical results, but like better. And just to add to the lulz, just to ramp up the meme factor here, instead of your typical aluminum can caps, I'm going to be using aluminum organic polymer, I believe they're called. You see these in electronics all the time, like computer motherboards. They apparently have a form of dry electrolyte that is more reliable, longer lasting, because indeed the moisture in typical can caps is going to dry up over time, though I make a point to order 105C rated capacitors with the highest hour rating possible. Some of the capacitors I'm using in my builds are like 10,000 hour raters, and that's at 105C, which means they can work at the boiling point of water for 1,000 hours before they're expected to fail. That pretty much means under normal conditions like a pedal, they're probably going to outlive us. But I digress. Now, as far as the resistors go, I've kind of already gotten a bit of a jump on that. So here's my first clone that I built, and I used the carbon film resistors on it. But then I built this identical unit recently. It's a commission, actually. Someone wanted one. Except the difference is in this one, it's exactly identical, pretty much, except I use the metal film resistors. Now, one addition to this guy is I have socketable diodes, so I can try different diode settings. But other than that, it's completely the same pedal. The difference in tone that I found between these two pedals is margin of error. What's margin of error? It's tolerances. You see, your typical carbon resistor is going to have a tolerance of 5%, which means you order a specific value, it's going to be within 5% of that value, and you can order a batch of them. They're all going to be a little bit different. Capacitors are worse. Now, fortunately, film capacitors are reasonably, I can get 5% easy enough, and they're not much more expensive than 10%, but some might be 10%, especially if you're a big corporation trying to cut corners. The worst is the aluminum capacitors. Their average is 20%, and that's even for the good ones. If you want to get tighter tolerances in that, well, you lack options in your value or they get very expensive. So the fact of the matter is you can order a batch of the same components at the same time and build several identical pedals out of those exact same components from the same batches ordered at the same time. And all of them will sound a little bit different because of the tolerances, to the point where there's one that you might like better for this application and another you might like better for this application, even though they're the same pedal. It's called stacked tolerances. That's the engineering term for it. It's like when you take enough components that have a 5% rating and mix them together, those 5% add up to the point where two identical units you build will be completely out of spec from each other. It comes up in the machining department a lot where, you know, if you have two components with 5% tolerance that are designed to mate together, if one's 5% bigger and the other's 5% smaller, they're not going to fit. If one's 5% bigger and the other's 5% smaller, then they'll be too loose. The assumption is probability and averages dictate that they'll generally always fit, but there are the circumstances in which they don't. So let's talk about the capacitors. Well, why are ceramic capacitors so bad? I don't know that they actually are. However, let us take a look at this capacitor. It's rated 8.2N. or 0.0082 UF. Let's plug it into a tester here. Right off the bat, you see it's not even what it says it is. We're getting 9.9 NF. Now, from the exact same batch, let's plug in another one. This one is 10.3 NF. You see what I mean? You're spec'd out for an 8.2, and what do you get? A 9 point something and a 10 point something. Obviously, that's gonna affect your tone, especially if you start having many of them stacking up those tolerances. To add insult to injury, let me show you the real reason why a ceramic capacitor gets a bad rap. It just so happens that the dielectric, or whatever it's called, that they use in it is not very good. If I kind of touch the capacitor, you're gonna notice something. Oh, what's going on? That value's lowering. The very heat of my fingers just touching this capacitor is causing the value to drop. That might actually be 8.2 N at 20 degrees Celsius. And as soon as you put it in different temperature situations, like I think it's 24 in here, all of a sudden the value changes. And to prove it's not capacitance for me touching it, I gotta give it a little bit of heat. You see that go? That's the real reason why ceramic capacitors might suck. I have done listening tests, and there's a few applications in which, oh, this ceramic capacitor sounds pretty good. And in fact, I think, in theory, you know, based on what some engineers will tell you, you're not gonna hear the difference. It's just the fact that the tolerances are so wild on them. Now, you can get away with that in a pedal, you know, provided you're not playing an outdoor gig in the winter or a gig on a hot stage in the summer. But heck, if you put these in a tube amp where the chassis starts getting real hot, your amp is gonna change its sound from the time you turn it on to the time you're done the gig. However, not all ceramic capacitors are created equal. This is an MLCC, which I believe is made by Murata, or it could be a TDK. It's going to be a 5% tolerance, and it is going to have a dielectric called COG, whereas the typical ceramics, it's called like XZU or Z5U, something like that. I can't remember, there's so many of them. But COG is, to the best of my knowledge, one of the best dielectrics you can get and the most temperature stable. So let's pop this in and see what we get. Boom. 561. It's going to be a 56N or a 0.056. Bam, right away. The tolerances gives us a 0.2. But right away, it's giving us the rating. And if I touch it and put heat on it, well, we are seeing some uplift, but that's because it's hard for me to touch the thing without touching the contacts. And as soon as you touch the contacts, you're changing the capacitance value. So what happens if I give it a little blast of heat? Nothing. Ooh, subtle, subtle. But as you can see, COG is way more temperature stable. So if I use these guys, this pedal should work as intended. And truth be told, I've done some listening tests with some of those nice COG ceramics, and I like what I heard. I may start using in more builds, not just for the lulz. So, how about I go build on this? You've seen me build pedals before. Should I even bother filming it anymore? Now we're scoring up a 5x7 perf board so we can snap her in half. Oh, quality control on these perf boards a bit off. There's a hole that didn't get punched out. Though I think that's right in the sweet spot. I don't really need a punch out. Oh boy. Tiny, teeny, tiny, tinna, 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 tinna. Now this time I'm putting all the wires in from the back, or at least these ones. Trying to see if I can get this resistor to share a hole with the wire. Okay, that saves us some trouble. Pretty much just connecting the wire directly to the 100 ohm resistor in the back. The input wire, however, I do believe is better off coming in from the front, like usual, because we need to bind it to the pin here. Where's our output? Yeah, bottom volume here. Oh, that one's coming in from the bottom too, I think. Yep, there it goes. You can jam it through the same hole as the pot. All right, the circuit is built. Look at that. All with the blue parts, and the input capacitor is going to be socketed. Same with the diode clipping capacitor. You're going to be able to turn off and on diode clipping like usual. Then I got wires coming in from the bottom this time. It's just, I'm finding tricks where I can figure out how to share holes. Some components will fit through the hole together. So if I can share holes, it makes things easier. Like the input for the power. This gets entirely too close. Oh geez, it just disappeared. So anyway, if I can get it through that hole, then it gets it farther away from this. I changed the layout here to accommodate this capacitor, and it crowded this area a little bit more. This 100Z resistor, 100 ohm resistor was an afterthought. It wasn't in the original design. You know, one day I should redo this schematic with a ground bus, because this could come around the bottom and then go back up, and then I guess these could flip down, or it might be tricky here. Ideally, I think I could optimize on this a bit, but it works, so figure I'd just leave it alone. And once again, we'd be moving on to fabrication. The top of the box. Like usual, we cover the box with painter's tape so we don't scratch up the paint, making sure that any wraparounds, we'll do them on the end. We want a flat surface on the side so that when we put our square on, it will be true. We're gonna start off at the top of the box, making room for the power jack, so we know where to index our board. And these Hammond boxes, 6 centimeters. Center would be 3. 2.567, 2.7 centimeters. Center looks roughly here. Puts our input jack right here. And then of course, once again, we bring in a consultant. We gotta bring our deck height right down for this though. Oh, I ran out of room. I've never drilled into the top with this before, obviously. Maybe the deck right out of the way. That bit won't go down enough. Okay, we have a problem. Well, I think for this, we'll try going directly in with the cone. It should work. I've only recently started using my drill press for these, and the last couple of pedals that I used it with didn't have power jacks on them. Once again, I'm using the wrong kind of power jacks. It's going to be center positive, which is non-standard, but I do have a power supply that runs center positive. I need to order more of the plastic ones that are center negative. We can mock mount our jack. Maybe I should have biased it a little bit more towards the bottom to make room for, like, it's not gonna touch. I gotta squish the contacts down here, flatten them, so they don't take up too much room. But that one comes awfully close to the box. It doesn't touch though, so it'll be fine. So now we shall determine how much room we're gonna give ourselves. Right about there should be good. Pop a square across it, and then square across the front. And then there's no real finding center because the knobs aren't going to be exactly proper aligned. What we do is we just eyeball it. Put the board up against, put the knobs about where we want them, and mark those centers. I'm gonna take the jack back out. Looks like it went fine. Save ourselves a step. Now we should be able to mock mount the board. Yep, there it goes. We need to break the little nubbins off the edge of the pot. You know, maybe one day I should drill holes for those nubbins instead. And we mock mount the board. We can determine placement of our jacks. Input be on this side, output be on this side. Let's determine our spacing. Pretty much center. All right, this jack's 3/8. This one is bigger than 3/8. The next step up, 7/16. Let's remove our board. I got my jacks backward. Means I'm gonna have a loose hole for the output. Gonna have to compensate with a bigger star washer. Can you even hear me over this thing? And finally, determining our stomp switch position. I guess, well, let's plop a battery in there, about where we want it to sit. Put the stomp switch just above it, because it's gonna hold it into place. Hold her down, mark the center, and copy it around front with the square. Then mark center, 3 centimeters. And it's just straight up a 1/2 inch hole. Ta-da-da. All right, on with ensemble. I'm gonna start off with the power jack. We might have to tuck in some wires before we can actually put the board in place. Okay, I gotta remember how this works again. I got these different connectors for the battery, and now I'm questioning if the spec is going to allow me to use them. I'm gonna have to mock install this thing. Okay, let's see. Oh, it's gonna be tight, but we'll be good. We'll be good. I wanna try one of these new connectors with grossly oversized leads. All right. I need to fit the board. This positive has to go onto the battery terminal. They're biased downwards. These all have to come out this way. This one has to go that way. And I want just a little bit of buffer zone like this. All right, now we can bolt down this board. It's going in nice. Ooh, gotta keep track of which wire is which here. Get our input jack in place. Board negative to ring. No, board negative to sleeve. Oh, damn it, this wire's not long enough. Ugh, that's no frickin' good. How did I size this up and it equated? Okay, well I made this wire a bit short, but it's still gonna reach. Fortunately, power input doesn't pass signal. Get another ground wire ready to go over to the output jack. The output jack, we make sure we use a star washer. Even though I don't know if this one's big enough because I made that hole too large. Just. It'll be okay. All right, time to get the switch in and hook up all the routing of the signals. Hey, oh shit. That needs to go underneath. Ah, boy. Yeah, I'm gonna get a bigger star washer. 14 mil wrench on this guy. All right, to fabricate a little jumper for the stomp switch. This switch is gonna have true bypass. The original 250 only has half true bypass. Basically, the input lines are jumpered together. One goes to the board, one goes to the switch, and the switch just routes the output either from the board or from here. And the other half is doing nothing. So you have probably some sort of impedance or capacitance attached to your signal with this method. Here I'm undoing that. I'm straight up toggling through the switch. It will be completely disconnected. I'm getting faster at this. And it's done. We just have to put in the crystals, but it is done. And of course, it's bad luck to put the knobs on before you've tested it. So, let us get some crystals in place. Now, one thing I wanted to try in this build is a better quality IC socket. Where's the rest of my capacitors? Okay, so these are 102s, yes. One of these is gonna go into the input socket. The other one, I gotta spread its legs a bit and get it into the diode socket. After we put the diodes in, typical 1/4/8. Look at all this. How cute it is, these little blue buddies everywhere. Except we're gonna be breaking up the blue with a splash of red. Cause now we'll put the jumper into place to activate the diode clipping. This thing should be good to fire up. We'll start it off with a battery. Wonder how this battery's doing. Got enough juice to run this. We're just plugged into the crate amp over here. I think it's set up in the mode where it'll work with overdrive. I think it's safe to say it works. All right, I've proper gone set up the old 800 so we can hear what this actually sounds like. Got both pedals here, the original and the Conspiracy, but these are both set up identically. I got them running off batteries that are sitting at the same voltage, and they're both loaded with the RCA 3140Es, which I can tell sound identical. So for all intents and purposes, we got some differences, but they're the same, except one's the blue components and one is the, well, yellow? Film capacitors, carbon resistors, standard can caps, and then we have our organic cam caps, ceramic capacitors, and metal film resistors. Diode clipping is turned on both pedals because it actually sounds good with the Marshall. So let's plug in and see what happens. I'm gonna turn the volume down on both of them. That way we'll be able to tell which one's turned off. You'll notice I never put LEDs on these because literally I tested the circuit. LEDs consume twice as much power as the actual circuit. So at that point, it's like it's just a battery drainer. I'm not putting an LED in there. Also for my purposes, I don't really need one. Okay, so this is fully bypassed. We're gonna need some more volume than that, eh? Now that is just a stock Marshall. Let's kick on the original. Typically, I crank the volume. They are so the same, but there is something different in this pedal. It's almost like this was a little crispier crunchity, and this one kind of has more like there's more wind in there. It's hard to explain. It's almost like the capacitor value is too big. I don't know what to tell you, man. The difference I'm hearing is almost margin of error. I can't really, like... Oh man, they almost sound exactly the same, to the point where I don't know if the components are making any difference or if it's just subtle differences. Like, I want to check the schematic here real quick. Now, if I look at the location of some of these capacitors, the 4.7U is directly in the single path. The 10U isn't. The 10U is just a power supply capacitor. So theoretically, one of those organic caps would have little to no effect on the sound whatsoever. Like, it's not in the signal path. This 4.7 is though. Let's turn off disable jeez, this battery just keeps jumping out. Let's disable diode clipping and see what difference that makes. Pull the pin, pull the pin. Because like I often like to use these pedals without diode clipping. Can you hear why? I prefer this sound better. Actually, if I use the 1N34s, I think that's the part number, germanium diodes, I prefer that diode clipped sound better. Yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you. There is an extremely subtle difference, but it's so extreme, it comes down to tolerances. There might be just a touch more warmth and tightness in this one. This one sounds like maybe a touch looser, but more so with the diode clipping in place. Once I disable the diode clipping, they're so close. I can't even call it. I can't even call it. But that has been the Cobalt Conspiracy, my new blue pedal that I'm probably gonna play a lot because it offers features that oh, yes, I can change the input capacitor value, and I wanted to try bumping it up a little bit higher than 1N. This amp in particular doesn't need it, but I find when I'm playing the Jubilee, I want just a touch warmer. So let's try 2.2N. And ironically, I am fitting a film capacitor into the anti-film pedal. Ooh, treachery. Okay, I got the answer I'm looking for. Yeah, from 001, gray spec is 0.01, too much, don't like it, good in some applications, not for me. 0.001, Malmsteen spec, but it can be too thin sometimes. 0.0022 might be a sweet spot, twice as much, but not that much more. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you appreciate what I'm trying to do here, because I have no clue. I'm just having fun building pedals, y'all, and I wanted to try something new here. So, stay tuned for more. I got a couple more pedals builds coming, and I got some more op amps in that I'm gonna be trying out. I get a kick of how this pedal sounds with different op amps. It's really cool. You wanna flex on your tone? Flex. You wanna tweak on your tone? Try different op amps. That is my professional advice. You heard a wavy cat, I'm pointy cat. This is good luck.